Starring Rupert Grint as the main character Walt, this episode focused on love, death, life, and an alternate dimension where one goes when they're fearful of passing on and are not quite ready to go. Within this episode, we witnessed Walt do all that he could to bring his sister Epperly back from the dead, and try to amend the past where he didn't try his hardest to save her. However, this was his time to do so. So with that, I thought I'd recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from the episode. So let's get into it. Here is Cabinet of Curiosities Episode 6, Dreams in the Witch House, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Dreams in the Witch House was an episode based on a tale by H.P. Lovecraft, and it certainly lived up to the horror nature that the writer embodied within his work. Following the death of Epperly in the early 1900s, we witnessed Walt, her twin brother, blame himself for not trying his best to save her when she needed him most, especially with the fact that he said that he'd never let anything bad happen to her. This was his own personal ghost that haunted him within his mind, and we saw that in 1933, several years after her death, when the episode was then set, he was devoting his life to finding a way to connect to the world that he witnessed his sister getting taken to when she passed away all of those years ago. There was a really poignant line towards the start of the episode when Walt's friend Frank decided to move on and get a job that was centered more around making money. He said, "You care more about your dead sister than you do living." And we saw this exact statement become true in the final moments of the episode, where we saw that Walt's body was taken over by Jenkins, the rat, and he said how he'll hold on to the body for as long as possible, because he wasn't making use of it. Walt wasn't doing anything other than mourning his sister from over a decade ago, and he wasn't living the life that he should have done. So much so that he did ultimately end up dying, leading him to be reunited with his sister Epperly, whom he'd spent the entirety of his life trying to bring back to his world. But in the end, one can only assume that he joined her in hers. We saw that witchcraft was something that was at the center of this episode. We saw that there was once a witch that lived in the house that Walt went to go and live in order to get closer to his sister. This was an individual called Keziah Mason. Keziah Mason was somebody who in the 17th century was put on trial, punished, and killed by the people of the town for believing that she was a witch. Just like Epperly, she was somebody who wasn't ready to go and wanted to find a way to navigate back to the real world and live amongst the people again. This is why we saw her presence so much throughout the episode. So much so that there was a prophecy that herself and Jenkins believed, that if Walt was killed, she'd be able to use the flesh in order to be herself again and walk amongst the regular world. However, we saw that even though Keziah Mason had the key and was able to kill Walt, Epperly went to save him and instead pushed the key inside of Keziah's eye, which ultimately destroyed her and made the threat to be neutralized. Following this, we saw Epperly was no longer stuck in the Forrest of Lost Souls, as she wasn't scared to pass on, and was ready to be able to move on, something that had kept her in the forest for all of those years. Walt said that he wouldn't let anything bad happen to her, and when they reunited and she eventually passed on, he didn't. This then meant that in reality, Walt was lying in the bed with Frank and the painter Mariana at his side, tending him back to health. Walt was depicted in the painting to be dead by the time that the sun rose the next day, which was something we saw hadn't happened as Keziah Mason was destroyed instead. With the damp still being something that was leaking through the ceiling, we witnessed Mariana and Frank go into the attic whilst leaving Walt resting on the bed. Here we saw that Keziah's decomposed body and skeleton had been left in the attic all of those years after it was never found back in the 17th century. Alongside her was the body of Jenkins within the box next to her. So the body was never found because the people that took her placed her inside of her own home hidden away. Whilst the pair of them were in the attic, we saw Walt wake up in a panic and say that there was something inside of him. This was when we then saw Jenkins burst out of Walt's chest as he wasn't destroyed amongst the chaos and he wasn't bonded with Keziah and within the circle as was depicted in the painting. So he instead was able to take control of the body, completing the ritual and ensuring that Walt would be destroyed by sunrise, and was then able to inhabit this world in a form that was more preferable to him instead of a rat. Walt spent his life trying to communicate to the dead, so much so that the moment he had the opportunity to start living once he came to terms with everything surrounding Epperly, his life was something that he no longer had, showing that he'd wasted his life. We heard how Epperly thought that he would have gone on to be a pianist, but it was something he stopped doing after she died, as he spent all of his time in pursuit of finding the forest, something which quite literally took over his life and ruined his waking days. It was a powerful ending for sure, and one that had an ending that was happy for Epperly and Jenkins, but tragic for Walt. I thought this episode was okay. It was definitely more on the traditional horror side compared to some of the other ones that we've had in the anthology. I wouldn't say that it was my favourite, and out of the 6 that I've covered so far, I would say that it's the second from bottom in my personal ranking. It would sit just above Graveyard Rats. I thought the soundtrack was extremely eerie, and the sound effect to Keziah Mason screeching was disturbing and uncomfortable to listen to, along with her visual appearance too. The use of the Skyboat song being something that Epperly was singing or humming whenever she was present was a really nice touch to the episode. The song contained lyrics that focused on a girl that was gone and was sailing over the sea to the sky. It mirrored the arc of Epperly and her fear of passing on, but being aware that she was no more and needing to take the journey to beyond. The colour grading and lighting in this episode was very similar to what we saw in Pickman's model, which was set around a similar time period. In fact, there may have only been around 6 years difference. The oakiness, dark and warm saturated yellows were present, and the fact that they were aligned to how we've seen other episodes set in that time period was good to see, as it showed consistency. In terms of the acting, I don't think the acting was the best in this one. I'd argue that I feel the deliveries of the characters could have been the worst out of the 6 episodes so far, which was a shame because I do feel as though the story was there. This episode contained a fleshed out story that I feel, despite being focused around a brother mourning his sister, it also shone a light on spreading a message about not living in the past for too long, as you never know how much longer you'll be able to have a present. It was a traditional horror story that I feel was depicted well in the 2 worlds that we were introduced to, and despite being one of the worser episodes in the series, it was definitely still an enjoyable watch. Go and give it a watch and see what you think. I've been covering all of the episodes of the anthology so far on my channel, so feel free to go to the channel to see all of the previous episodes that I've touched on, or stick around as I release some more videos on the final 2 episodes. So, there you have it, Cabinet of Curiosities Episode 6 Dreams in the Witch House Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos such as Endings Explained, Theories and Predictions and Character Breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.